Hello, thanks for joining me again. This is the US Futures weekly chart analysis for the week ending 19th of May 2023. First chart, as usual, is the US dollar index futures. Such an important chart. It plays such a large role in the price movements in many of the other markets that we're going to look at shortly. And last week I suggested that price may test the 103 level. And that's exactly what's happened this week. You can see the lows of the range are down here. Price did push lower. There was a reluctance to push any lower than this, and price sort of accumulated sideways for quite a few weeks before pushing higher 2 weeks ago and showing a little bit of intent. And this week price pushed up. Now this bar here, you can see the volume is a bit increased down here, much higher than all the previous bars. I expect there will be some supply drawn out from the left if price moves up and attempts to challenge this previous range. You can see as price pushed higher this week, it moved back, probably in response to some increased supply being drawn out to close right at this level because there's relative safety below this level. The market has absorbed the supply previously below this level, but there is likely to be supply to the left through here. So price looked good this week, so I expect there'll be an early test for supply next week, so price will move a little lower, and then supply will be found to be low. The market will attempt to move higher, and then it will draw out supply. It may tag the lows of that bar, which is at 104, if it was really strong, but I expect supply will be drawn out and price will close back close to where it was this week, and we'll get a bar that looks something like this. So that's what I reckon is going to happen, a bit of an upthrusty little bar, and price will then, the following week, test for supply and response or move lower and find support back at these levels. You'll get a test of the lows prior to any attempt to push higher again. Next chart is the E-mini S&P. This is S&P 500 index futures. The more recent highs come through here, and you can see price responded very nicely to the sort of awkward looking test for supply the previous week. That's what it is. It's not a perfect one. Down here you can see that volume was well below average, so selling pressure was low, and in response that allowed price to push higher. There was, as usual, as I always say, a little test for supply early in the week, and I expect supply was found to be low. That's what allowed price to move up and close at this 4,200 level. This market looks like it would like to go higher. It will only do so if there's favourable trading conditions, and that may include a little bit of weakness to emerge in the US dollar. We'll have to wait and see there. But this market looks like it would like to go higher. I know markets have been a little jittery more recently, and that's why we've had this sideways trading for quite some time. But markets do climb higher on a wall of worry. They rarely move higher with buoyant enthusiasm. And at the moment, there is a wall of worry in place, and this market does look like it would like to go higher. That's not to say that it will, but it looks like it would like to. And I'm expecting an attempt, at least, to move higher. US Treasury 10-year note futures moved lower this week. Just putting in some lines. Here's the highs of the previous range, which eventually failed. Here's the current highs. And here's the lows of the range. You can see that price has broken clearly below the lows of the range this week. Now, there is some chance when we wait for the response, because we always wait for the response before we jump to conclusions, that this could turn out to be a reversal of some sort. which would then make this a shakeout, but over 2 bars. So keep that in mind, not to say that it will happen. It's still a possibility at this point in time. Now, if price was to see further downside follow through in response, the next clear level is down here. There's a minor level that comes through there at 112. So price could move to the 112 level and test this for strength first. That's probably what you'll see over a week. This is too large a move to come down here. There is stronger support at the 110 if it was required. But just keep an open mind here. This market has shown strength more recently, so I won't be surprised to see at least an attempt for a 2-bar reversal. So we'll see what happens next week, but that's certainly a possibility. Copper price futures have seen a little weakness more recently, although if you remember from last week, this bar here, where it did seem to break down, was on below average volume. Yes, it was increased volume, but it was still below the average, which was up here. This bar moved lower with an increased spread on lower volume, and that suggests that selling pressure wasn't particularly high. What it does suggest is that the market was forced to stretch lower in order to satisfy the sellers in the market because of a lack of demand, and that's why this bar stretched as low as it did. Now this week, you can see volume was even lower again, selling pressure was even reduced further, and that allowed this market to stabilise somewhat. Spread was much narrower than it had been previously, and if you look, here's the highs of the range when the market was accumulating back here prior to the initial breakout, and that's where prices come back to this week. It's just tagged it slightly by the looks, and there's an attempt to support the market just through here. Selling pressure has reduced and a little buying support has come in. So we'll just see how that goes over the next week or so. You're seeing this sort of trading where price is forced to stretch lower in order to satisfy the sellers when there's not enough demand in the market more often now. And I think it's due to more traders understanding the market dynamics and all being on one side of the trade at the same time. But we're seeing this more and more where there's so many more people on one side of the trade and nowhere near as many people on the other side. And it's causing the market to accelerate back and forth more than it used to. Next chart is gold price futures. Gold price futures pulled back this week. It had been in sort of a bullish absorption pattern just recently, but the price, particularly with the strength in the US dollar, the price of gold has moved lower more recently, back below this 2000 level, and that's caused price to just dip lower. Now there was some buying support come in off the lows. Here's the close, here's the lows. That close off the lows on slightly above average volume suggests that there was some buying support come in the market. And if that buying support is determined, you might find price just moves up a little bit in response next week. What happens on that US dollar index is going to be very interesting. It's going to play such a strong part in some of these commodity markets. If you get that up thrusty bar that I suggested on the US dollar index futures, you might see price test for supply early in this market before closing back up near its highs, and you'll get the inverse of that, something more like this, and that will put price probably on a springboard to attempt to move higher. But we'll just have to wait and see, because there was some buying support off these lows. You might see price attempt to push higher in response, but it'll probably be a weak push higher. It won't be a really strong push higher unless you do get weakness emerge in the US dollar, in which case you'll get a much stronger response. Next chart is silver price futures. Silver price futures saw some support come into the market this week. Selling pressure certainly eased. It was much stronger last week, and you can see on the volume it's well below average. Spread narrowed considerably. Selling pressure has reduced. Now, the important level comes through here on this chart, and the highs of the range through there. There is certainly supply above this, so this is just the highs of the more recent trading. But price dropped below this level last week. It had been attempting to absorb through this level, and this week selling pressure reduced, effectively in the shadow of this zone, and that will allow price to push higher given favourable trading conditions. So if the US dollar does move lower at some point next week, you might see this price move higher in response. Barring that, if you get that little up thrusty bar I said originally, you'll probably get a secondary test for supply, just like that. Light crude price futures, if we put in, here's the previous support level down here. It makes it more clear that you can see that prices dipped into this level and found support. Here's the recent lows through there. Prices comfortably trading between roughly 70 and 82, and it looks like it's going to remain in that sort of zone for at least some period of time. If really serious weakness comes in, which I'm not expecting, a break below this level would be significant. And if really good strength came in, a break above this level would be significant. I'm not expecting that either. You've got the highs of the next range coming through there. You can see price moved up to it previously, but never really issued any serious challenge to that level. If there was a breakout above this level, this would be the next target level to move to, sort of 93 3/4. But I'm expecting price to remain trading somewhere between 66 and 82, probably between 70 and 80 as much as possible, sort of through here. This looks like the sweet spot at the moment, and that's where I'm expecting crude to continue trading. And just on that, this week's bar wasn't a strong bar. It was an up bar in response. On low volume, closing in the middle, you'll almost certainly see an early test for supply next week, something like this, and then a response depending on how much supply is actually drawn out. Aussie dollar currency futures. You can see where price has been, where the previous absorption has been, and price is trading for many weeks now in a sideways range, roughly between 66 cents and 68 cents. And this market trades the inverse of the US dollar quite a lot. And it does trade on its own fundamentals to some degree, but it's pushed around a lot by the US dollar. And what happens in the US dollar market is reflected in this chart, almost the inverse every week. So the US dollar appears like it's going to go up and then close lower. So I expect this market will go down and then close higher. So you'll get something like this, like those other markets. But unless there's some significant movement for some reason, then I'm expecting price to continue trading sideways between 66 and 68 cents. Bitcoin futures are starting to get a little interesting. This market does trade very consistently. It's a fairly high volume market. That's the important level at the moment. There is some supply that was drawn out from this level, and this is an accumulation zone. all of this. This was a little unfortunate and unexpected. Price was in accumulation mode through here, and this was one of the brokers going broke or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but there was a serious issue and it looked like price had broken down and would continue lower, but that didn't happen at all. The accumulation that had been occurring through here just continued on as though nothing happened, or sort of nothing happened. And then price did what it would normally be expected to do, move up to the highs of the range, threatened to break down again, and then break out. Price did continue higher, and it looks like price is going to come back and test the breakout for strength. That would happen about 50% of the time. Half the time, price moves up and then continues higher, and about half the time, price will come back, test the breakout for strength. If the breakout is strong, support will be found at this level, and then price will accelerate away and move above the previous highs. That's generally what happens, and this market is trading very consistently. It's been a good market to follow, and its moves in the past and more recently have been close to textbook. So I'm expecting a test of the 25,000 level for strength. I do expect sufficient strength will be found at this level to confirm the breakout, and then price will attempt to push higher again, and a push above these previous highs here would signify a successful breakout and price then to move higher. Just finally, back to the US dollar index futures. I'm expecting price will test for supply early next week in response to the supply that was drawn out within this bar here. This bar has higher volume and is likely to have supply drawn out from the left. You can see it was reflected in the highs of this bar here, where price just settled back down in the relative safety of this bar's low. I would expect an early test for supply next week, just like this. I would expect supply to be found to be low. Then the market will attempt to push higher. It'll push up, possibly tagging the lows of this bar at 104, but we'll see. And then I expect supply will be drawn out and price will move lower in response and probably close somewhere adjacent to where it did this week, about here. So let's see what happens. But that's the most likely scenario as I see it next week. Thanks for your time. See ya.